Hi, I'm Rabba Dr. Carmella Abraham, and I want to thank Torat Chayim for inviting me to speak about the Parsha. This Shabbat is Shabbat Parshat Vayikra, and also Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the first of Nisan, and Shabbat HaChodesh, the final of the four Parshiot, the four special Torah readings. Shabbat HaChodesh, Shabbat of the month, takes place on the Shabbat preceding the first of the Hebrew month of Nisan, or like our coming Shabbat on the first of Nisan itself. And all of these readings are about sacrifices. In Vayikra, the chapters discuss all kinds of sacrifices: voluntary offerings, nidava, li'olah, mincha, and shlamim, and mandatory offerings for transgressions of certain mitzvot, korbanot, of chatat, and asham. For Rosh Chodesh, we will read of the sacrifices brought during the week and on Shabbat and on Rosh Chodesh. In Shabbat HaChodesh, the Maftir will include a discussion about the Korban Pesach. And even this Haftorah from this Shabbat, from Yechezkel, speaks of Korbanot as well, the future atonement sacrifices and offerings that will be given during the dedication of the third temple. Did I lose you? The minute I said sacrifices, did your eyes glaze over? Did you stop listening? Did you tune out? Korbanot, which is supposed to draw us closer to God, to make us more karov, close, as the root meaning of the word would suggest, seems to have the opposite effect. How do I make sense of sacrifices today? The idea of korbanot hits up against our modern sensibilities with a whimper. And that is because we have seen these texts over and over and over again in our daily prayers, Shabbat prayers, during Musaf, beyond, holidays, different Parsha readings, and we don't care to look closer. For many of us, we've decided, I don't understand it, this happened so long ago, we don't have a Beit HaMikdash, and I just can't relate, and I pray now. I suggest that because our prayers are replete with these texts on korbanot, on sacrifices, that we must look back, we must look closer, and we must bring intention to these readings. We have to lean into the concept of sacrifice to begin to make some sense of it. We should all try a little harder to understand this ancient practice and to see what meaning it can have for us today. The first place I want to start is our Siddur. Because in our Siddur, during Birkot HaShachar, during the morning blessings, we find Parshat Korbanot, a whole recitation of these offerings. If you're not sure that where it is, it's because most of us skip over it, or we've been taught to skip over it during our davening, during our praying. And yet, when you look closely at what is written over, right above the recitation of the offerings, and you will see this in the Koren Siddur, the publishers or the editors of the Siddur make sure to write the following. Chazal held that in the absence of the temple, studying the laws of sacrifices is the equivalent of offering them. There are different customs as to how many passages are to be said, but the minimum requirement is to say the verses related to the Korban Tamid, which was the daily sacrifice. What is the source for this? The Torah, or Rav Yaakov ben Asher, writes in the beginning of Orach Chaim, his halachic code on the laws of prayer and synagogue service. This is what he writes: it is important to rouse oneself from sleep in the morning to serve God, and it is good to recite a number of parshiot, or Torah chapters, and the Torah goes on to list those things that should be recited. And in that list, he includes the parsha on the korbanot. Rav Yosef Karo, in his commentary, the Beit Yosef, cites the following Gemara as the source for the Torah. Tani 27b, which describes the midrashic conversation between Abraham and God during the Brit Bein HaBetarim, the covenant of the parts. In this covenant, as you recall from the book of Genesis, God tells Abraham about the destiny of his descendants. They would be strangers in a land where they would become oppressed and enslaved. God would ultimately redeem the Jewish people, and they would inherit the land of Canaan, the land of Israel. So in Tani 27b, we see the following discussion between Abraham and God. Abraham said before the Holy One, blessed be he, perhaps Israel will sin before you, and you then will do unto them as you did to the generation of the flood. God said to him, no. He, Abraham, said to him, how shall I know that I shall inherit it, that I shall inherit the land of Israel? God said to him, take for me a triple calf. That is the pasuk that is found there in Genesis. The sacrifices are the guarantee of the gift of the land. Abraham said to God, this is true when the temple is in existence. What will become of them when the temple is not in existence? God said to him, I have already established the order of the sacrifices, the Seder Korbanot. For whenever they read it, I consider it as though they sacrifice before me a sacrifice, and I, God, shall forgive them for their transgressions. This midrash begins to give us insight into the study of Korbanot. Read the Korbanot, says this midrash, and I, God, will forgive you for your sins. As we wake up in the morning and prepare ourselves for prayer, we are asked here, this midrash asks us to consider us to do some introspection during Birkot HaShachar. We must think over what has happened from the last time we said Birkot HaShachar, which was the day before, to today. These words of the description of the Korban Tamid and the other Korbanot in the Beit HaMikdash and the temple bring us right back to that space of the temple in Jerusalem, and even pull that space of the Beit HaMikdash into the here and now. The readings of the words of the sacrifice tie us to the past. Ask us now, here, today, to grapple with our humanity. Have you sinned against others? Have you sinned against God? Would that sin require a chatat or an asham? How do we appropriately make amends? How do we do this work so we can draw closer to God? The sacrifices that we say can set a tone for the remainder of our prayer, to meet God honestly as we are, so we can begin the vital inner work to mature. Reviewing the multitude of sacrifices every morning in Birkot HaShachar, and even paying close attention to the readings this coming Shabbat, can also pull us into the future with the promise of a rebuilt Beit HaMikdash, the third temple. A profound message as we prepare for Passover, a reminder of our redemption and what yet has to be redeemed. Thank you, and Shabbat Shalom.